Does the NFL have Jalen Hurts figured out heading into 2024, or is the Kellen Moore hiring keeping the Eagles a step ahead of the game at quarterback? We'll get into it coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Thursday edition of the podcast. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri, and we're brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase of tickets. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Gino, we have just 8 days until the Eagles' regular season opener, which feels weird because it's only a Thursday, but we know they're playing the Green Bay Packers Friday Night Lights in Brazil. We'll get into the Brazil aspect of it later on in the show, but only 8 days to get ready for this football game. And I think we have to talk about, of course, the quarterback battle, Jalen Hurts versus Jordan Love. This is going to be a big-time initial test for a team that last year looked dead in the water for the final 2 months, and their quarterback, who was carrying you through a lot of the issues you had the first 12 weeks of the year, kind of looked dead in the water in his own right. And a lot of the on-field contextualized struggles, Gino, I think came from a result of cover zero, from heavy blitz looks from opposing defenses. And while that wasn't all Jalen Hurts' fault, you look at the offense for Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni, it's never really had a hot read outs for Jalen. They always relied on him being Houdini and his mobility. But at the same time, the NFL does think Jalen does not perform well against the blitz. This was a quote from an anonymous defensive coach from The Athletic saying basically, if you attack Jalen with this kind of mentality, he struggles. And so I think this is something that's a big-time test for Jalen in 2024. Without Jalen Hurts, or I should say without Jason Kelce now calling out protections, with Kellen Moore's offense putting an added emphasis on pre-snap reads, pre-snap motion, there's more responsibilities for Hurts. And I'm super curious if he can handle this, because this is what he wants. It's what he wanted last year, and he's eager to learn, as he said on WIP today. So this is kind of sink or swim time.
It's just interesting because these questions weren't being asked 2 years ago when they had Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator.
Well, they were the first half of the year. They were terrible against the blitz for the first
Oh,
half.
without a doubt. But then they figured out how to get their guys in space, how to
That's
get
fair.
Jalen Hurts and these guys into a rhythm where
That's
it
a good
wasn't
point.
just, let's set it up. We're going to put the guys out there. The defense knows exactly what we are going to do. The Kellen Moore hiring is exactly what you needed to do to combat that. Because what it is going to allow Jalen Hurts to do, and you've heard everybody talk and now take away the Jason Kelce element, this is Jalen Hurts' offense. This thing runs through him. He's going to have to identify coverages. He's going to have to call out how he wants the protection, how he's going to move it around, have this connection now with Cam Jurgens that he hasn't had. He had that with Jason Kelce, who's going to be a Hall of Famer, somebody who had been around the NFL, seen every single type of defense, how the league had evolved over years. It's Cam Jurgens' show now. Those two have to be on the same page, but it all falls on the shoulders of your quarterback. But if you pay a guy $50+ million a year, and you do not expect him to take that leap and get to that next category of quarterback where it is all in his control and he basically sees the field faster than everybody else, that's what you have to allow Jalen Hurts to go and do. Is it going to be perfect, Lou? Absolutely not. There are going to be bumps in the road, but to allow him with Kellen Moore to understand things like, hey, let's say we're closer to the left boundary, right? And we have multiple wide receivers lined up to the left-hand side. And one of those wide receivers is a little bit closer to our formation. And I see this cornerback who's on this guy creeping down a little bit. Well, Kellen Moore, those are the things that he is going to combat. He's going to say, hey, Jalen, if you see that corner creeping, we got to be hot there. We got to be hot where they're departing that spot. We're going to put some motions into those areas where they're vacating. So if we see the blitz, not only are we going to have a hot, but we should have a motion that is already going to attack that area. And the guy who's in conflict, which is usually that overhang player now, that is covering down on that blitz, that's where you're going to use Saquon Barkley to your advantage to put that guy in conflict on like these wheel route type of things, or you're going to have just quick hitters in the middle of the field where if they're not getting carried with man, you're just going to sit in zone and take advantage of space. And that all comes pre-snap, but having the evolution to read post-snap. And that's where Carson Wentz's downfall ultimately came, Lou. He was great reading pre-snap, but when post-snap looks came, he could not adjust. Jalen Hurts, he's intelligent enough. They're allowing him to do it. You don't make this hire if you don't trust that your quarterback can do it. Look who Kellen Moore has been with, Lou. Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, quarterbacks that you have to trust to allow you to run your playbook. Why is Jalen Hurts any different from those guys?
No, you got to be able to do it anyway. If Jalen Hurts can't do it in this new offense with Kellen Moore, then there's your answer. And I think, he didn't have to do that because of Jason Kelce in the past, but also the coaches just didn't really give him that option. And at the time, maybe that's what that version of Jalen Hurts needed. But it did he even said it on WIP today, it kind of, I don't want to say stunted his development, but in a way it did. Like, here's the quote from WIP. We had a great player, and this is from Jalen Hurts. We had a great player in Jason Kelce who took on a lot of responsibility. And as a result of that, I was told not to worry about a lot of things. And so my eagerness to learn over the years kind of was halted, but now times are different. So Jalen wants this. They need this for his long-term development. And I think he can do it because although in the past, there's reasons to be skeptical. He's never handled this kind of offense before and this kind of responsibility. But you mentioning 2022 is great because they did figure out the blitz the second half of the year. Jalen Hurts himself really did figure it out. And not just from a mobility standpoint, he had answers inside the pocket. And then that switch to Steichen to Brian Johnson really did mess things up. So I believe he can do it. The Eagles believe he can do it, and he wants to do it. This is the kind of offense he wanted last year, and now he's got it.
If you look at what Brian Johnson ultimately did when he put them in a bad position with this offense, it came down to the defense being able to play at full speed. You have to make the defense think for a split second, right?
Yeah, that's all the difference.
There were many times when defenses, they could bait Jalen Hurts into some of these throws, right? You could kind of push his buttons a little bit and make this throw, Jalen, but we're going to jump this thing. Now, when you're in this motion-based and your eyes have to go everywhere, if you're even hesitant for a second, Jalen Hurts, who has been great in the pocket, Lou, why should we doubt that he isn't going to get even better when he has a split second more to react?
I get the reason for some skepticism because last year in the second half, he was terrible. And not just because of Brian Johnson. You look at that.
This isn't the NBA, man. This isn't a one-man league. This is.
No, I know, but it's a fact that it's a fact that last year he sucked against the blitz in his own right, in the second half. For sure. So I do want to add context to that. But as you mentioned, over the years, he has shown the ability to do it. And this summer, he was nearly perfect. When it comes to processing, when it comes to mistake-free football, diagnosing the blitz. That I also think that's a huge proponent or aspect of this, Gino, is Vic Fangio, such a blitz-heavy coordinator, that's going to do wonders for him fixing this in 2024 is how much Fangio is probably showing him different looks this year in camp.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, look at how aggressive Fangio was with some of these second and third team guys. You don't think they're sending all sorts of different things that we have no idea what it is right now.
I think Darius Slay said just that in his press conference a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we've only seen a vanilla sample of the things that Fangio is going to do. But if you don't think he's testing out some of these looks, some of these games that he's going to play with all of these different formations on this offense to give them all the looks as a defense, and then at the same time challenge this offense, which needs to be challenged, it's going to do them all good, Lou, because Fangio, his defense has to figure out, how am I going to cover this motion-based offense day in and day out? And if this is one of the harder schemes that I'm going to have to go against pre-snap based on looks, well, how are things going to be when you get into the regular season when you have sharpened that iron? Both of these hires, I think they go hand in hand with each other. And I think they did a really good job where it wasn't just hey, we're going to elevate the next guy up, Brian Johnson. We're going to try and go down this disciple type of route. No, let's get the guy who invented this cover six defense, who's seen just about everything. He's no BS. The guys have responded well to him. And Kellen Moore, he's intelligent in his own right, Lou. I would love to just be a fly on the wall in those meeting rooms when you're hearing him and Jalen Hurts talk about these different looks, right? It's just not on Kellen Moore's shoulders to scheme this offense up. It has to go hand in hand, and Jalen Hurts has to say, hey, I like this, this, and this. Hey, I don't like this look. We had done this in the past. Right. It didn't work. That's how it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be We go in there Monday morning, we look at what we did wrong on Sunday, but we learn from our mistakes, and that's only going to make your quarterback better, your OC better. And if he can handle, Lou, nearly 55,000 different play callers in his entirety in his football career, I think he can handle one more offensive change going.
And this feels
year.
like the final evolution for Jalen. Like, he has to be able to thrive in this kind of offense. And Darius Slay, again, I want to go back to that press conference. He said it a few weeks ago that, yeah, Jalen has more responsibilities this year, but there's more answers as well in this Kellen Moore offense if Hurts can find them. Whereas, yeah, last year, I think two things can be right. Jalen wasn't great against the blitz, but even if he was, sometimes there just was not answers because Brian Johnson's dialing up vertical routes, when it's an all-out blitz. So
yeah,
I think
expect
Slay
a couple of
said
hitches in our slot receivers this year, right?
So Slay said it. He's like, Kellen's got Jalen right, and this can help him get to that tier one with the Patrick Mahomes. Like, he can be an elite processor, and that really is that final step that Jalen really, I don't want to say he's never gotten to because he was at times in 2022, but it has been far less consistent than I would say other elite quarterbacks.
Well, yeah, when you have one of the all-time greats in Jason Kelce, who's one of the smartest centers that the league has ever seen, when somebody says, don't worry, and I'm sure it was Jeff Stoutland that told him that, like, hey,
that's
Jalen,
the thing,
don't worry about this. We got
it's not like it was all because Hurts wasn't capable of having these responsibilities. Like you're saying, they had Jason Kelce at center, and he is one of the greatest of all time at diagnosing this kind
if
of
it ain't
stuff.
broke, don't fix it. Like, why put just a kink in the chain?
Yeah, so these all these things can be true. Like, it wasn't all just a reflection on Hurts' inabilities. Some of it was just they had the GOAT on the inside, but this year they don't have that, and Hurts has a lot more responsibilities, and we'll see how he's going to handle it starting next Friday in Brazil against the Green Bay Packers. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, got some news updates for you, including some injuries in the secondary. How's that going to reshape the roster? It already kind of has a little bit. We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, our brand new sponsor. And let me tell you, 5 Hour Energy saved my life for about 2.5 years. I worked the radio life, overnight shifts, 10:30 p.m. to 5 o'clock a.m., Sunday night through Thursday. Like, that was my existence for 2.5 years, grinding radio, doing podcasting, waking up again at noon to do another radio show. My life was talking ball, and 5 Hour Energy really got me through those times when I needed a pick-me-up. And I wasn't a big coffee drinker, not really into tea. Like Red Bull was not my thing. 5 Hour Energy was my thing, and it still is. Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot to stay alert. Watch all your favorite games this season. If you stayed up late to see that intense overtime game, take one in the morning. 5 Hour Energy, we thank them so much for sponsoring Locked On Eagles. They're a brand, hard-working people like you. We've trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, and that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, get some 5 Hour Energy products today. You can use our promo code LOCKEDONFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5 Hour Energy today, and again, use that promo code LOCKEDONFB to receive 20% off. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, make sure your second listen is the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Gino, we were talking because the Eagles just got down to the 53-man roster a couple days ago, and James Bradberry ended up making the team. And we weren't happy with that, of course. I don't think he earned a spot based on his play at safety. His reputation at corner should be thrown out based on his tape from last season. But he made it, and it was fine because it wasn't while not keeping Tristan McCullum or Ben Van Sumer and Eli Ricks. A young guy didn't really get cut that deserved a spot because of Bradberry. But we were saying, like, what happens when Sidney Brown is activated from the PUP list in 4 games? Like, is there somebody that loses their spot? Do they try to trade somebody? Well, we kind of got an answer today on this, not problem, but the situation that could be coming up by default because James Bradberry is out 6 to 8 weeks. He suffered a lower leg injury That's going to keep him out at least the first 2 months of the season. The Eagles did place him on injured reserve. Orion Burks, the linebacker that had a great game on Saturday.
You're adding an I to his name. You keep adding another syllable to his name. I love it. You're making it harder for yourself.
Orion Burks was on the Eagles practice squad, was the third 49ers linebacker last year. He was activated, had a really good game on Saturday against Minnesota. So for now, he has that final 53rd spot, Gino. But I will say, once Sidney Brown comes back, I think he'll take that spot, and I think they'll still try to move Bradberry when he's healthy. It sounds like per Jeff McClain, they were trying to trade him, but the market was just non-existent.
It looked like Tennessee was the only team that we had heard of that had interest in James Bradberry. Now that decision is kind of made up. This is one of those things that it all of a sudden kind of plays into Howie Roseman's hand, where he kind of wanted to get James Bradberry somehow off of the roster. He wasn't able to trade him. Nobody ever wants to wish injury upon anybody, but James Bradberry, he comes back before the trade deadline, Lou. 6 to 8 weeks. The week 9 is the trade deadline now. That still opens up a window if a team does have an injury and he does come back healthy. Orion Burks is signed to the roster, but then, Lou, just a couple hours later after that, the Eagles claimed defensive tackle Byron Young from the Raiders. Now you're going to have to waive somebody again. We're going to go through this whole exercise tomorrow. You're at 53. Who is it going to be? Because now it looks like you're going to carry 7 defensive tackles, like Vic Fangio said that he wanted to. Are we going to get into this equation a little bit earlier than we thought? And it comes because James Bradberry does get hurt, and then Orion Burks does get elevated, and they didn't wait to claim a guy, and all of a sudden they do claim somebody, and now you're going to have to release maybe one of those guys we talked about in a Tristan McCollum, in a Ben Van Sumeren, in a Thomas Booker. I think they play the game with Avonte Maddox. You're the vested veteran. We'll sign you to the practice squad and go about it that way. But to lose one of those guys at the expense of James Bradberry going on IR, that would be a long-term con on his end, and that would just be a really shame.
Yeah, and, we were kind of skeptical. We were wondering why Bradberry didn't play on Saturday, and maybe we thought they had a team. Like, they had a trade worked out, and everybody knows what they're getting with him already, so why play him? Maybe try to trade him at that point. Maybe he already made the roster, so he wasn't playing in that way. Either way, for me, I think he was in the way. And this injury, like you said, it doesn't totally clear it up, but I at least am happy with the fact that the Eagles were trying to move him. So I imagine when he comes back, like it wasn't about depth. And like Howie Roseman said, this is a guy that's had experience and success at corner. Now he has, safety corner versatility. That was all just GM speak. And that part, at least, I'm pretty pleased with, because I was not happy with keeping him if it was in the name of losing one of these younger players.
Howie Roseman's good at playing that game. Like he's not going to really ever talk bad.
He's trying to trade the guy. He's got to hype up his value.
And especially because Bradberry has been nothing but professional, like the way that he's gone about this.
Yeah, and again, this sucks for him. Like, I don't want to sit here and make it sound like we're glad he got injured. So
we just have to start to put the puzzle back together again after a move like this happens. Like now multiple things do happen, and all of a sudden we're playing the game we were playing for the last couple weeks in camp, here to get this 53rd guy on the roster all of a sudden because you're reverting somebody to the injured reserve list. But when Sidney Brown does come back, he's the guy that no matter what, you find a way to keep him on the roster. It has to be Avonte. Like, I don't see anybody else in that defensive backfield unless you move Eli Ricks.
Yeah, no, maybe Ricks, but
you can keep McCollum on the practice squad, which you more than likely could, but
they don't just release Burks again. I think that's probably the most likely result.
But why would you have signed him in the first place to the active roster if you planned on releasing him?
Just for a month, you have that 6th man at linebacker.
And so you don't have to elevate him. Good point. Yeah, you don't have to use the elevations. I didn't even think about that. See, this is why Howie Roseman's way better at this. Like, now he has to play the game. Like, how are we going to go about this? And they have interest in Byron Young, and that's good that they're willing to add more players to the roster, even at a deep position, Lou. I mean, you had 6 defensive tackles. We thought Thomas Booker was going to potentially be a guy that you could cut and only have 5. Now they have 7 of these guys.
I liked Byron Young, by the way, coming out of the draft, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah, Fran Duffy said graded Byron Young as a rotational backup coming out of Alabama in 2023. Technically sound college player, not explosive enough to be a dynamic 5-3 tech, not stout enough to be a true nose tackle, a bit undersized for traditional 5 tech, but enough tools to be a spot backup at all 3 spots. Versatility, versatility, versatility. That's exactly what it rings. And that's why the James Bradberry thing is tough, Lou, because Ian Rappaport kind of put out like a tongue-in-cheek tweet, like, "Oh, the Philly secondary takes a hit." Like, did it take a
I
hit?
saw other
Like,
beat reporters
he
phrase it
wasn't
that
going to
way.
play
They
safety.
didn't.
He wasn't going to play cornerback.
this
Like,
does not
he
hurt them in
didn't
the
have
slightest.
versatility because he wasn't going to be on the football field.
And I've seen some like Eagles bloggers suggest like, here's who the Eagles can sign at safety. I'm like, they don't need a safety. They are
It's all figured
totally fine. They have
we're
Chauncey
talking
Gardner
about the
Johnson.
53rd guy. Let's relax.
They have CGJ and Reed Blankenship. They have Avonte Maddox right now, who had a really good summer. They have Tristan McCollum, who had a great summer as well. So that's 4 players already. Cooper DeJean showed on Saturday he can be that hybrid slot safety player, which you've projected for him in the NFL anyway for the last few months. That's 5 guys that can do it. And you only have Sidney Brown out for the first month, the first 4 games, and then he's back too. So there's 6 options that are not named James Bradberry. I don't understand. And that's been my thing for all summer. It's like, why do people keep suggesting Justin Simmons and they have to add a safety? I don't know. I'm very okay with the depth right now. I think they're fine.
Yeah, don't try to tell me that the sky is green. Like, I know it's blue. Like, there's nobody that's going to convince me otherwise. Like, paint it
it's
however
not a big blow
you
for his
will.
corner depth either, because if any corners got hurt, you have like 3 guys in front of him.
Lou, he was not going to be on the football
He
field.
was never going to. Right, and he doesn't play special teams.
Caden Stearns, who's on the practice squad, has a better chance to play than him because he was a Fangio guy who they signed because he was a Fangio guy. When he comes back
gets
healthy,
he's going
to be the next guy up. Like this,
I agree.
This is such a non-story when it comes to like the overall top end depth. This is the back end stuff we're talking about. Money in the crumb type of territory. Like this was the 53rd guy in our opinion. Like I don't know. Like he did not deserve to be on the roster to begin with.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, there's better play. Like just turn on the film, and it's no. I feel bad saying this because it's no disrespect to him. It's how good these young players are and how we have to see them play football. And he was not going to be in the equation because if you think you're taking Cooper DeJean off the field for James Bradberry to be your like nickel overhang player, you're out of your mind. If you think you're taking Isaiah Rodgers or Keely Ringo or Quinyon Mitchell or Darius Slay off the field for James Bradberry, you are legitimately insane. There's no other way to put it. They're not even in the same stratosphere right now.
No, I completely agree.
That's all I got to say about that. Sorry, I got a little long-winded.
No, you're good. James Bradberry out 6 to 8 weeks with a lower leg injury. He is now on injured reserve. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we've had some Eagles players make some comments about this trip to Brazil next Friday. We're going to give our thoughts on that situation against Green Bay. Coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
This episode of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Folks, I know the Eagles have a game down in Brazil next week, but can you smell that? It's a cheesesteak, some crab fries at Lincoln Financial Field. How unbelievable is that when you're tailgating at CBP and then you get to walk into the link with your ticket from Game Time? Right now, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to shows, and it'll give you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. As I said, if you want to get down to the link in this upcoming season, get down to Citizens Bank Park as the Phillies push towards the playoffs. Flyers will be back before you know it. So will the Sixers. Hey, if you like the Philadelphia Wings as well, you could get tickets for that. You like concerts, you like comedy. Game Time has you covered. All you have to do right now is go to gametime.co or download the Game Time app today, and you are going to get $20 off your first purchase while you use code LOCKEDONNFL. That's the secret. If you don't use code LOCKEDONNFL, you're going to have to pay that $20. But again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
All right, we're wrapping up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. The Eagles kick off the season in 8 days. Can't believe it, although I'm dying for this season to start. Friday night lights in Brazil, Eagles, Packers. And, I think it's cool the Eagles aren't playing on Sunday. I like that the Eagles play on a day where there's no other football. Then hopefully they win. You could just
I hate
enjoy.
it.
But I love relax-free Sunday.
Toss me in the
where there's
1
no
o'clock.
Eagles.
1 o'clock.
That, yes,
6 other games are on.
I agree.
Nobody knows what happens week 1.
That's fair too. You kind of get lost in the weeds, and then you can enjoy the rest of the day.
Okay, but week 1, you're on this national stage. Everybody's itching to see it.
My least favorite is the 4 o'clock. I hate 4 o'clock because I feel like I'm nervous and I'm not enjoying the 1 o'clock games. Just get me to the Eagles game. And then if they lose, I do not want to watch Sunday Night Football.
Yeah.
So I like that it's kind of on a Friday because it's just, it's under a microscope because everybody's watching. But it's one game. We focus on the birds, and then we get to enjoy the weekend of football, hopefully with a win over Green Bay. The one annoying part about this situation, though, is that it's in Brazil, and it doesn't sound like a lot of the players love it. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, they were asked about the trip on their press conferences today. Devontae Smith said, no comment. I'm just going to line up and play football. A.J. Brown said they had a lot of meetings this week about what to do and more so what they're not able to do in Brazil. And for me, it's just like, I don't know, it feels, I understand the part of growing the game, but you're taking a home game away from this team, from these fans. And if you look at their schedule, like overall, we said it when the schedule came out, I don't hate the way the schedule is lined up, but if you look at the first 8 weeks of the season, they're only in Philly because of this Brazil game, which was supposed to be a home game. They're only in Philly twice until that game against Jacksonville, week 10. And then they have their bye week in week 5. So they're on the road for the first almost 2 months of the year. And now they can't even really enjoy this experience. So I don't know. It just feels like the NFL kind of, I don't want to say rushed this, but it doesn't feel very well planned out. I don't know.
Can you put money in the pocket of the National Football League? That's all it really comes down to.
That really is just so obviously what this is.
It's like these guys are mercenaries to an extent. They fly them in, show them off, parade them around.
Are they even going to show them
fly
off?
out? I mean, in the stadium, they will. But that's the thing, Lou. This is one of the dumbest decisions the NFL has ever made. You have a game between two teams that wear the color green in a stadium where their rivals wear green, so teams aren't allowed to wear that color. It's not even in Rio de Janeiro.
It's not even in Rio. That's the craziest part.
That's why, to me, it's like, yeah, in Germany, you have a couple games there, so you could spread it out in a couple cities. Like, the London games are still going on because London is the biggest city. And then we don't play this thing in Rio de Janeiro where they have the infrastructure where an Olympics took place 8 years ago.
Yeah, it just feels like they're going to this random place in another continent that does not care, doesn't like the color of these teams. The players can't do anything. They can't leave their place. A.J. Brown said they were advised not even to bring their phones around. I don't know, man. It's crazy. And as an Eagles fan, if I'm a season ticket holder, hearing that would make me even more frustrated.
The thing about this quote-unquote 9th home game is that it almost feels like the carrot on the end of the stick for a pig, It's like, it's never going to get there, but we promised that you were going to get another home game. But it might not actually be a home game. It was almost like this bait and switch that the NFL did. And every time they do these things, Lou, these games that are in different continents and stuff, to me, it makes the decision to never move the game overseas that much easier. Why are we doing this? Play it in front of our home fans. College football does it great. Even the neutral games in college football are under criticism. Could you imagine college football taking it? Imagine Alabama, Auburn, the Iron Bowl moving down to Costa Rica. People would be out of there. There would be an uprising in the South. That would be terrible.
This is week 1. It's a really good game. It's a big matchup. You would want home field advantage against Green Bay.
Historic teams that have played a lot of history, man.
This might be a team you're competing with for the 1 seed or for a top 2 seed this year. It's 2 of the best teams in the NFC. I don't know. If you were going to do this, which I didn't want them to, but I guess give it of that schedule, do the game against Carolina or Jacksonville or Washington, in the middle of the season. But to do this at the opener, especially when you have a game on Thursday, such a big one, it just feels unnecessary.
It's just part of the carnival. Let's toss another game in there. Got to make money somehow. The only saving grace of this, Lou, is it's on Peacock, and Peacock has the clearest
Yeah,
definition of any of the streaming services,
very true.
in my opinion. So it will be pretty to watch under the lights, but man, can we just let the guys play in front of their family? Like, that's what they want to do. It's such a nightmare. Like, Slay has said it before, getting his family to the Super Bowl was an absolute nightmare. It cost them tens of thousands of dollars, and it's like probably going to cost them the same amount to do the get down to Brazil, man. Like, it seems like an inconvenience for everybody outside of the NFL shareholders, who are going to be happy because they get the money in their pocket at the end of the day. And we don't get any of that money, so we're going to speak out about it here at Locked On Eagles, because we're for you in Philly who want to see this game at Lincoln Financial Field, because how amazing would that be?
I would have loved to go to this game. I mean, I would have loved to go to the opener, but I'm not going to. And I know some friends that are going. Shout out to Gail from 4th and John, our boy Gail Saunders. He's headed down there. I'm not going. I mean,
yeah, travel safe, everybody. But if the Eagles come out with a win, we won't be talking about anything.
Just get in and
that.
get out. Get in,
mercenaries.
Get on that plane,
do the mission and get the heck out of there,
plane.
man.
Like,
yes,
let's go,
sir.
boys. We're getting right on the plane.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. 8 days. Cannot wait. We'll get you covered for that game. Get you ready for it, I should say, for another week right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off for now, though. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.